Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Jacory Croskey-Merritt, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 5 running back rankings for the 2025 season. Over the course of today's episode, going over my top 36 running backs. So if you're looking for my thoughts on a specific player, you can travel down to the description of the video. There are timestamps available there. While you're down there, do not forget, of course, subscribe to the channel as we're making daily fantasy football content and help us get one step closer to achieving our goal of 100,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. Before we begin, of course, we'll talk about matchups at the running back position. But I also want to remind you, there are 4 teams on bye. So players such as Josh Jacobs, Bijan Robinson, DeAndre Swift, Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell will not be included in today's video, so do not forget that. Okay, so let's talk about matchups as we approach Week 5 based on rushing statistics allowed by each individual team thus far this season. The Tennessee Titans, Giants, Ravens, Bears, Bills, etc. are the most advantageous matchup in terms of rushing statistics allowed to opposing running backs. Therefore, we're firing up players such as Trey Benson against the Tennessee Titans, Alvin Kamara against the Giants. Of course, the Baltimore Ravens gave up 4 rushing touchdowns to the Detroit Lions alone, so that may be a little bit more of a deceptive matchup in itself. But of course, we'll navigate and we'll talk about that for the entirety of today's episode. Just wanted to go ahead and present these to you guys before we begin. Again, some of the more disadvantageous matchups going into the week based on rushing statistics allowed, the Jaguars, Seahawks, Rams, etc. Now that we've covered this, a quick reminder again, before we get into today's video, for those of you guys who want my all-encompassing rankings every single Sunday morning, be sure to check out Betr. There's a link down in the description. If you sign up today using code Andrew, make that first time deposit minimum of 10 and make a first time play within a real cash play, picking more or less on 2-player statistics. You'll be eligible to get those rankings every single Sunday morning for my email directly to yours. All-encompassing rankings for half and full PPR at every single position, including flex. So for those of you interested, check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility based on your current location. And new users who sign up today using code Andrew get a free $10, so take advantage of the opportunity. Thank you very much. Okay, let's begin with my top 36 running back rankings, beginning with our number 1. It's Christian McCaffrey. We all know he's an auto start, but I just want to go ahead and point out a couple statistics that I've gathered going into this week. Of course, thus far this season, Christian McCaffrey has found a lot of success within the receiving category, coming off of another week in which he had 11 targets, 6 catches, 92, and a touchdown. 72% of his fantasy points in a half PPR have been contributed from receiving statistics. If you were just to isolate his receiving statistics, receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns, he would be considered the number 9 overall wide receiver thus far this season. And going into the Thursday night matchup against the LA Rams on a short week with Purdy, Pearsall, and Jennings all trending towards potentially not playing, this could be a game where Mac Jones, takes over the quarterback conversation, and Christian McCaffrey could see upwards of 20 targets within this game. On number 2, we have James Cook, who's coming off of another huge performance of 117 on the ground and a rushing touchdown. That's 3 consecutive games of over 100 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown minimum. And as long as he continues to put together those performances, of course, he's an auto start. Just to put into perspective just how rare that kind of success is, throughout James Cook's career, specifically in 2024, in the 16 healthy games he played during the regular season, he was only able to accomplish 100 total rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in 4 of those 16 games. And again, has already accomplished it 3 times this season. Via PFF, in terms of run blocking grades as individual teams, the Buffalo Bills are number 1 amongst all in the NFL as of thus far this season within the first 4 weeks. They have an opportunity of taking on a division rival this week in the AFC East against the New England Patriots, who just most recently allowed 114 rushing yards by the Carolina Panthers running backs, and of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers running back 63 and a touchdown. The week before, of course, an automatic start. On number 3, we have Jahmyr Gibbs, who takes on the Cincinnati Bengals, who are struggling as an offense, have only scored 1 touchdown in the last 8 quarters of play. So it's not really a surprise that the Lions at this current moment in time are 9.5-point favorites and are expected to be in a positive game script, which should lead to a lot of rushing and potential touchdowns for the likes of Jahmyr Gibbs, who has gotten himself 97 total yards and at least 1 touchdown in 8 of the last 9 games he has played in his career. So if we're trending in the direction of taking on one of the most advantageous matchups at the position, the Bengals allowing over 16 fantasy points per game on the ground alone, 4.71 yards per carry on average. Recently, Denver, 159 last night on the ground against them. Minnesota, 165 and 2 touchdowns. And the week before that, Jacksonville went for 126 on the ground. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery should find a lot of success this week. To close out the S tier, we have Jonathan Taylor. Look, it's not really a surprise that he was bundled up by the Los Angeles Rams. They bundled up Saquon and did the exact same thing to Jonathan Taylor. Now, in this most recent matchup, was given opportunities inside the 5-yard line to score a rushing touchdown. Unfortunately, didn't find success, which did eventually lead to a Tyler Warren receiving touchdown. But of course, the positive note is that he did get those opportunities. So going up against the Las Vegas Raiders this upcoming week, who are allowing 4.23 yards per carry on average, nearly 12 fantasy points per game on the ground alone, have given up the following statistics to opposing running back. The Washington running backs, 143 and 2 rushing touchdowns. Chicago this most recent week, 56 and a touchdown. But when we're taking on the running efforts of the Indianapolis Colts, expect for a lot more success from Jonathan Taylor. To begin the A tier, we have our number 5, Achane. Look, Achane is coming off of a fantastic performance of nearly 100 rushing yards. The Ollie Gordon experience and experiment really just didn't pan out. And they're continuing to, lean upon Achane as the primary running back, coming off of a game of 22 opportunities and 21 touches last night. Not too much receiving utilization or opportunity, primarily because they were in a positive game script. And that could very easily be the case once again this week, taking on the Carolina Panthers. And if in fact that is the case, honestly, it's an advantageous matchup. That's why I have him at number 5. They're taking on the 7th best matchup at the position, a defense allowing nearly 5.4 yards per carry on average to opposing running backs, 15.5 fantasy points per game just off rushing statistics isolated. Most recently, New England, 97 to 2 tutties from their running backs. Of course, Atlanta, 122 on the ground, and Jacksonville, 173 on the ground against this Carolina Panthers run-stop defense. Number 6, we have a rookie running back, Omarion Hampton, who's coming off of back-to-back weeks of over 20 fantasy points. We said it. The breakout is going to come, and once he takes off, he's not turning back. And even though we are having a lot of offensive line injury issues with the Los Angeles Chargers, we're still finding an abundance of overall success from Omarion Hampton, who had 12 carries for 128 and a rushing touchdown and got himself a lot of receiving utilization, which is incredibly promising. Omarion Hampton's situation is reminding me of Jonathan Taylor back in 2021. When Marlon Mack went down with his injury, he took over. In the case of Hampton, unfortunately, the sacrifice was in the form of Najee Harris, but Hampton is not looking back, as this most recent week, 3 of his rushing attempts led to 101 rushing yards. That's the kind of burst potential he has as a downhill runner, while also being enough of a finesse back to be able to catch the ball 5 times, which is really, in back-to-back weeks, kind of Eckler-esque numbers, which we know that Justin Herbert is not afraid to check it down to his running backs, especially when the offensive line is not healthy and they're getting after him. Nonetheless, they have an opportunity against Washington this week, who most recently gave up 126 and 2 touchdowns to Atlanta running backs, 84 on the ground to Las Vegas, and 84 and a touchdown to, of course, the Green Bay Packers running back, specifically Josh Jacobs. Number 7, continuing on with the rookie conversation, let's talk about the rookie Quinshon Judkins, the thumbnail of today's episode. I heard earlier today that, of course, there's a possibility in which Joe Flacco could end up being benched. Once that is official, of course, we'll go ahead and potentially adjust. But in the event in which, of course, we are still seeing this offense run the ball as much as they have over the course of the last 2 weeks, giving Quinshon Judkins 19 and 25 touches, which have led to 96 and 115 total yards and 1 touchdown in each of the last 2 games, with a 4.18 yard after contact per attempt, ranked number 5 amongst all running backs with 10 attempts minimum thus far this season. He is an incredible talent, coming off of a week in which, yes, he found success on the ground, but also 4 receptions for 33. So he is a 3-down back, clear and away. They take on the Minnesota Vikings this upcoming Sunday morning early in the Europe matchup. And as of right now, when we're looking at the potential of this Vikings matchup, the 8th best at the position, we're talking about running backs like the Atlanta Falcons, who combined for 219 and a touchdown on the ground against them, and Pittsburgh with Gainwell at the helm, 121 and 2 touchdowns from the Pittsburgh Steelers backfield, as they, of course, annihilated the run-stop defense of the Vikings, which, of course, I would anticipate the Browns to do the exact same this upcoming week. Number 8, continuing the rookie conversation, we have Ashton Jeanty. Again, patience is all that we ask for. I continue to tell you guys we have to go and we have to buy low on Ashton Jeanty because the breakout is soon to come. And once it in fact hits, he's going to run away with this job and never look back outside of being in this top 12 conversation on a weekly basis within my rankings. I mean, 7 of his rushes in this most recent matchup against the Chicago Bears led to 8 or more yards. Those 7 rushes combining for 128 of his 138 rushing yards. Again, that's the kind of burst potential he had. And in regards to the missed tackles that he forced in this most recent game, he had forced a total of 9 of them. That is the second most amongst all running backs in a single game thus far this season. The only other time is with Bijan Robinson having like 10 plus in a singular game. He's an elusive back. He's a downhill runner, and he's going to impose his will as the Raiders have finally found their identity as a run-first team going forward. Even though they are taking on Indianapolis, I am still very confident that he'll be able to get it done on the ground, and of course, having 2 receiving touchdowns through the air. I mean, there's always the possibility that he could always take one to the house once again down in the red zone. Number 9, we have Kyren Williams. With the 49ers dealing with all the injuries they are on the offensive side and defensive side of the ball, there's a lot of opportunity for the Los Angeles Rams to absolutely dominate within this upcoming matchup on a short week. Again, the Jacksonville Jaguars in this most recent week ran for 138 and a touchdown on the ground from their running backs. That's a Liam Cohen offense. Liam Cohen comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree. So if a Sean McVay coaching tree, who of course, according to Robert Saleh, are all great at stealing signs, I would anticipate that Kyren Williams is going to follow in the footsteps of what Travis Etienne first started this most recent Sunday, and is going to continue that this upcoming Thursday against this beat-up entire 49ers organization. And that's something that he has done in his entire career. This most recent season in 2024, weeks 3 and 15 against San Francisco, Kyren Williams was averaging 21.4 fantasy points per game and a half PPR against them. Expect for a lot of success this week. Number 10, we have Javonte Williams. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that the Dallas Cowboys did not lose a single step on Sunday, even though of course, they lost CeeDee Lamb and Tyler Guyton. As an offense, they were at their absolute best. I mean, thus far this season, Javonte Williams has been incredible. 4.95 yards per carry, averaging nearly 20 touches per game. Workhorse level of opportunity for Javonte Williams. And now has an opportunity of taking on a top 10 matchup at the running back position. Thank you very much. We'll take that. Allowing 14.58 fantasy points per game. Miami went for 109 in a rushing touchdown last night. Buffalo the week before, 162 in 2 rushing touchdowns. So why not Javonte Williams continuing to get 20 touches per game to impose his will upon this Jets run-stop defense. Our number 11 is Saquon Barkley. Look, thus far this season, every single one of his games has led to less than 100 rushing yards total. He's only averaging 3.08 yards per carry on average in comparison to 2024's regular season of a 5.81 yard per carry average. Only 5 times in 2024 had he ran for less than 100 rushing yards. He's already done that 4 times thus far this season. So either Saquon Barkley has slowed down significantly or the matchups have been incredibly difficult for him. Whichever way we want to go about it, I'm anticipating that Saquon Barkley is still going to be in this top 12 conversation as he typically is, coming off of a week in which he had 74 total yards and a touchdown, had himself over 20 touches. He is purely just a workhorse, and as long as that is going to be the case, he'll still be fantasy relevant, but the 30 fantasy point games that he was once able to produce aren't as commonly available to him. But hey, maybe this week against the Denver Broncos could change all of that and go ahead and go for 30 for us this week. Number 12, we have Bucky Irving, who as of right now, we're a little bit uncertain on. And I do want to say really quickly, PSA, if you have an opportunity of picking up Rachaad White this upcoming waiver period tonight, I would go ahead and explore that opportunity because on Monday, he had an MRI on an undisclosed injury. They haven't given us any updates on that. Therefore, if there's a possibility in which Bucky Irving is going to miss time, got to remember he's coming off of back-to-back weeks of 20-plus touches, isn't just being given a bunch of opportunity on the ground, but of course, a lot of receiving utilization, which we know that Rachaad White could deliver with. So in the event in which Bucky Irving is going to miss any sort of semblance of time, we would want to have his immediate handcuff, which in this case would be Rachaad White. Again, as of this week, taking on the Seattle Seahawks, it is technically the second toughest matchup at the position, allowing only 7.1 fantasy points per game on the ground alone and only 3.26 yards per carry on average. If he's healthy, we know he's an auto start. The question is he healthy? Be sure to pick up Rachaad White just in case to cuff him. Number 13, to begin our C tier, we have Travis Etienne. Look, he had a difficult matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, yet he still had himself an incredible performance of 124 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. And on that rushing touchdown play, he looked like the best player in the entire game on both sides of the field. An incredible performance. Again, he's nearly averaging nearly 100 rushing yards per game on average thus far this season within this Liam Cohen offensive attack. This week, they take on the Chiefs, allowing nearly 14 fantasy points per game on the ground, the 13th best matchup at the position, allowing 5.18 yards per carry on average. Philly ran for 107 in a tutty. New York Giants, 100 in a tutty. Baltimore, 118 in a tutty. So if you're allowing 100 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in each of the last 3 games, Travis Etienne should theoretically be implicated for a pretty big performance here, hopefully, if all things are healthy and ready to go. Number 14, we have Derrick Henry. Look, as of right now, the expectation is that Lamar Jackson is going to miss significant time. The latest report that I read was 2 to 3 weeks. Then when I went ahead and looked at where Vegas has the current structure of this game between the Texans and the Baltimore Ravens, the Texans are technically favorites on the road in Baltimore. So this kind of gives you the indication that they are not expecting Lamar Jackson to play this week. So if that's going to be the case, the Ravens defense isn't talented enough to be able to prevent negative game scripts. Luckily, they do take on the Texans. So of course, the Texans offense struggle to score. And if that's going to once again be the case, there may be an opportunity for the Ravens to run the ball 40 times this week with someone like Derrick Henry. Line up with Patrick Ricard, 2 tight ends, 6 offensive linemen, and run the ball every single down. And maybe not even send Cooper Rush out there to hand off the ball. Just snap it straight to Derrick Henry. The Texans are the 9th best matchup at the position. And this most recent season of 2024, Week 17 against Houston, Derrick Henry ran for 147 and a tutty on 27 attempts. Hopefully we can get that kind of number share. But if the matchup gets away from them and a negative game script approaches, it could be very difficult in the absence of Lamar Jackson. Number 15 is Trey Benson, who has technically the best matchup at the position. Again, we've talked about this. The Tennessee Titans offensively are struggling. Therefore, their defense takes majority of the abuse, allowing 20.75 fantasy points per game and 5.0 yards per carry on average. They have most recently allowed 100 plus rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown to every single team they have played thus far this season: Houston, Indy, LA Rams, and Denver. And those are great rushing teams, but nonetheless, a lot of success. So why not Trey Benson? I understand in this most recent week, because of the game script, he was pulled from the conversation. But this week, they are 8.5 point favorites at home. We're talking about a running back that's averaging 5.51 yards per carry and 3.59 yards after contact per attempt, while the Cardinals are also targeting their running back 7 times per game, coming off a contest of 5 receptions. Trey Benson in auto start this week. Number 16, we have Breece Hall taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Braylon Allen, earlier today, there was a confirmation that he sustained an MCL injury and is going to be missing some time. In the absence of Braylon Allen, it opens up a lot of opportunity for Breece Hall to be the primary back. He's coming off of back-to-back games with a full healthy Justin Fields in weeks 1 and 4, in which he's had 19 plus touches in each of those games, averaging 5.7 yards per carry in both those games, and has gotten himself an average of 5 targets per game. So if those opportunities and the effectiveness because of Justin Fields' rushing threat is going to continue to be there, why not against the Dallas Cowboys, who are the 11th best matchup at the running back position in terms of fantasy points allowed on the ground, 14.5 on a per game average. Therefore, Breece Hall an auto start this week, especially considering there isn't as much of a threat with a 2-headed monster in this backfield. Number 17, Cam Skattebo to close out this tier. With the implementation of Jackson Dart's rushing threat, that leads to less upside in the goal line conversations and a receiving downgrade, because instead of just dumping it off to someone like Skattebo because you're a statue of a quarterback, aka Russell Wilson, in the case of Jackson Dart, who is mobile and is actively scrambling and running, it leads to less total targets. But this week, they have an opportunity of taking on the Saints, the 12th best matchup at the position, who have recently allowed 120 and a tutty to the Buffalo Bills, 85 and 2 rushing touchdowns to Seattle in a blowout victory in which Seattle absolutely dominated on all three phases of the game. But as of right now, Cam Skattebo, Jackson Dart, both a rushing threat against an advantageous matchup. I'm excited for both of them, and hopefully he can find himself in the end zone this week. Number 18, we have Alvin Kamara. Speaking of this matchup of the New Orleans Saints taking on the New York Giants, I would be incredibly excited about Alvin Kamara's potential in this matchup if it wasn't for the fact that he doesn't get much receiving utilization. Even though he is coming off of, each of the last 3 games with 19 or more touches, and even though they are taking on an advantageous matchup, the second best at the position taking on the Giants, allowing over 6 yards per carry on average, 19 fantasy points per game on average, the usage of Kendre Miller and the lack of receiving upside that Alvin Kamara has found, alongside of the lack of rushing touchdown upside he has been associated with, certainly is troublesome. On top of the fact that he's number 14 amongst all running backs thus far this season in terms of total targets. It's not a great look. And despite the fact that this defense has allowed 128 in a touchdown to the Los Angeles Chargers running backs, 92 in a touchdown to Kansas City, 112 and 2 touchdowns in Dallas, and 133 in a touchdown to Washington, I'm hoping that Alvin Kamara could put up those kind of numbers. But again, with the backfield split, less opportunity in the receiving game, you never know. But of course, we're firing him up. Hopefully, he's going to find himself in the end zone. Number 19, we have Jordan Mason, who is staying in Europe for another consecutive game there. Of course, they played in Dublin against the Steelers, got handled this most recent week, weren't able to find much success within the rushing category, but did have 19 touches, which is quite promising. Now, Xavier Scott, the backup running back, while Aaron Jones is gone, is clearing away the preferred receiving back, as he was able to out-target Jordan Mason 8-3. Nonetheless, as we approach, when we have an opportunity of taking on the Cleveland Browns, outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, who averaged 6.07 yards per carry on average against the Browns, Montgomery had 9 attempts for 12 yards. There's a possibility in which, yes, Jordan Mason could find success, but in the event in which he doesn't find himself in the end zone, this could be a difficult matchup considering how great the Cleveland Browns run-stop defense has presented to be thus far this season. Number 20, we have Chuba Hubbard. Last week, he was dealing with a calf injury, and even though that was the case, we were anticipating him to play well, and he did. 3 receptions for 20 yards, 10 carries for 49 rushing yards. And this was all accomplished in 3 quarters of play. Didn't even see a single touch in the 4th quarter because by the time they got to the end of the 3rd quarter, and when Chuba Hubbard touched the ball at the end of the 3rd, the score was already 35-6. So therefore, they didn't need him to go out there and do anything more. And hopefully, with a rest, he could take advantage of the opportunity of taking on the Miami Dolphins this week, who are allowing 4.73 yards per carry on average and 12.5 fantasy points per game on the ground alone. On top of the receiving utilization that Chuba Hubbard continues to be exposed with, he's a fantastic play at a top 20 capacity. Number 21, we have Kenneth Walker. Look, Kenneth Walker dumps down into the E tier primarily because of Zach Charbonnet. Again, as long as Zach Charbonnet is going to continue to be there and going to continue to be the goal line running back, this doesn't bode well for Kenneth Walker's overall upside. Unless he breaks out a big run, which he's certainly capable of accomplishing. Thus far this season, 8 of his rushes in just the last 3 weeks, consisting of 10 or more yards. That's number 6 amongst all running backs thus far this season in terms of a total. I believe that's incredibly promising, coming off of a reception in this most recent week in which he had 29 yards. When we're talking about big playmaking ability, Kenneth Walker is certainly capable of it, but we are also taking on technically a matchup in which the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are only allowing 2.92 yards per carry on average thus far this season. That's the 2nd best amongst all teams in the league in terms of the fewest rushing yards per attempt allowed against running backs thus far this season. Again, we know he's a big-time player, just needs one singular run and can go ahead and change his entire week. He's given enough ample opportunity as a workhorse to still maintain a top 21 standing. Number 22, we have J.K. Dobbins. Look, R.J. Harvey's breakout last night could end up shifting this backfield, but the way that I see it, considering we have Sean Payton as the primary play caller and the head coach of this organization, he may go back to his Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara-esque two-headed monster days of the New Orleans Saints, kind of offense. If that's going to be the case, J.K. Dobbins will be, of course, filling the role of Mark Ingram, while R.J. Harvey should be the Alvin Kamara as the receiving threat, as a guy that can come in on occasional situations as a runner and dominate and find lanes. Taking on the Eagles, again, this Eagles run-stop defense hasn't been great this season. Therefore, J.K. Dobbins and Harvey should both be able to take advantage of it. Number 23 is David Montgomery. Look, in 12 of the last 17 games he has played, he has scored 1 rushing touchdown minimum, and he'll certainly need that going into the matchup, as they are 9.5-point favorites. When you look at the history of games in which the Lions recently have been favorites at this capacity, 9 or more points, a vast majority of the time, 80+% of the time, David Montgomery's finding the end zone. Therefore, if we're going to be in a position in which they're taking on the 6th best matchup at the position, 4.7 yards per carry on average, 16.75 fantasy points per game. Denver ran for 159, Minnesota 165, and Jacksonville 126. Why not David Montgomery to find himself in the end zone, maybe 60 rushing yards, and be a solid top 24 play with double-digit fantasy points and a half PPR. Number 24, we have Woody Marks. Look, Lamar Jackson is going to be missing. Therefore, the Texans have their clear opportunity to, of course, pick up another victory this week in which they can travel to Baltimore and find themselves successful as an offensive unit. Now, considering the contributions that Woody Marks made in this most recent week, he should be exposed to more opportunity as we proceed. The Ravens are technically the 3rd best matchup at the position, but outside of their game against the Lions, in which they gave up 4 rushing touchdowns, they haven't allowed more than 1 rushing touchdown thus far this season to any of the other 3 teams. Kansas City ran for 78 on them, Cleveland 98, Buffalo 70 and a rushing touchdown. So therefore, Woody Marks going to find himself a lot of receiving utilization, also going to find himself a lot of rushing opportunity, and if he can find the end zone, he's going to be far better than the number 24. Especially considering Lamar Jackson's not there, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the Texans offense to find success. Number 25, we have Tony Pollard. Look, the fact of the matter is we know that Tyjae Spears is returning and is going to be active. Last season, in games in which Tyjae Spears was active and healthy, Tony Pollard was averaging just 17 opportunities per game and 10.32 fantasy points per game and a half PPR, while only playing 57% of the snaps. We're going to get a 60-40 split as we approach, and even though the Titans are losing games, are in negative game script, they're committed to running the ball. We're still coming off of another week in which Tony Pollard saw a lot of touches in a game which they didn't see a single point. They did not score a single point as a team. Got completely shut out. Recently, the Arizona Cardinals just allowed 120 on the ground to the Seattle Seahawks. Therefore, hopefully, there's a possibility in which Tony Pollard can follow in those footsteps. Number 26, Chase Brown. Look, as of right now, this most recent week was quite promising in terms of the rushing opportunity share and the effectiveness of those 10 rushing attempts, 7 of which were 4 or more yards. Again, that's solid. But you're taking on the Detroit Lions. This is a negative game script. Unless Chase Brown is going to get himself 6 to 8 receptions in a given week, it's going to be difficult for him to get into the top 24 conversation unless he falls into the end zone. And the fact of the matter is the Bengals have scored 1 total touchdown in the last 8 quarters with Jake Browning under center. Number 27 is TreVeyon Henderson. Despite all of my confidence in the breakout, came away with 9 touches. Quite literally had less touches than Rhamondre Stevenson and less snaps played than Rhamondre Stevenson in this most recent week. Again, they didn't fumble the job away. The fact of the matter is TreVeyon Henderson is still in a committee. That is what the Patriots have committed to. And even though they are taking on the 5th best matchup at the position, the Bills allowing nearly 17 fantasy points per game on the ground, 5.44 yards per carry on average, have been dealing with a lot of injuries via their defensive line and their linebackers, which of course has made them incapable of stopping the run. 135 and a touchdown to New Orleans, 100 and a touchdown to Miami, playing down to teams. Why not this week? Against, of course, the New England Patriots. Number 28, we have RJ Harvey, who went ahead and had himself a breakout performance of 17.8 fantasy points and a half PPR. And like I mentioned earlier with J.K. Dobbins, there's a true, real opportunity in which this could be a backfield that turns into a two-headed monster. And that's the hope, that J.K. Dobbins is able to, of course, reprise the role of a Mark Ingram, and the Alvin Kamara-esque role within the Sean Payton offense can be RJ Harvey. And if that's going to be the case, then of course this negative game script that could be ahead against the Philadelphia Eagles could lead to a lot more receiving opportunity, as RJ Harvey has pretty much solidified himself as the number 2, and Tyler Badie didn't get himself much utilization within the receiving category, whether it's targets or routes ran. Of course, all of that in the favor of Harvey going forward. Number 29 is Zach Charbonnet. He handled 100% of the attempts inside of the 5-yard line in the 3 weeks in which he was active. Every single week in which he's been active, we haven't seen Kenneth Walker even graze the opportunities inside that conversation. Therefore, if there's going to be touchdowns implicated within the matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, expect for Charbonnet to have scored it. And if he's going to score it, he'll turn his 40 total yards and his touchdown into 10 fantasy points. And that's why I have him at number 29, because he is 100% contingent on falling into the end zone, for they are taking on a tough matchup against Tampa Bay's run stop defense, but very much so reliant on that singular opportunity, as he doesn't get as many touches as Kenneth Walker. Number 30, we have Tyjae Spears, who's coming off of the injured reserve, and hopefully as the week progresses, we're going to get ourselves a little bit more of a clearer picture as to his status and whether he is healthy. Last season, games in which he played with a healthy Tony Pollard, 8.9 opportunities and 8.4 fantasy points per game. With so many negative game scripts implicated, that means even more receiving upside, and of course, the potential in which he could be the running back that is going to be on that 2-minute drill situation and could see himself catching the ball 3 to 5 times within a given game, even though Tony Pollard hasn't been exposed to that kind of level of opportunity thus far this season. Hopefully that'll be the case. Moving on to our number 31, we have Jacory Croskey-Merritt. Bill, as of right now, he does not touch the ball in the first 2 drives of every game. Not only that, only once this season has he touched the ball in the first quarter. They kind of just want to deploy these running backs on an individual quarter basis. Like, first quarter is Chris Rodriguez dominating. Then we have Jacory Croskey-Merritt in the second and third, and then Jeremy McNichols will come out in the fourth quarter. Like, that's how it has pretty much been deployed as of late, which again, as of right now, that would technically make Jacory Croskey-Merritt an unstartable player, but he has just been so damn efficient in the limited touches that he has gotten, coming off of a week in which he had 7 for 47 on the ground, 2 catches for 10. If he's given more opportunity, would clear in a way put these other running backs to shame within this Commanders backfield. Number 32 is Nick Chubb. I mean, look, as of right now, taking on Baltimore, like I mentioned earlier, there is an opportunity in the absence of one Lamar Jackson in which this team could be taking an early lead and running the clock out. In the event in which that occurs, of course, we would anticipate Woody Marks to get the majority of the overall opportunity share, but do not expect for Nick Chubb to disappear despite the incredible performance of Woody Marks in this most recent week. Like I mentioned earlier, the Baltimore Ravens have been pretty solid in terms of stopping the run outside of playing against the Lions, which would be the case for the Texans this week, as they aren't the greatest rushing attack in the league. Number 33 is Rhamondre Stevenson. Played 57% of the snaps, out-touched Henderson, and has a fantastic matchup against the Bills. So if he's going to touch the ball 10 times, there's a possibility in which he could fall into the end zone. You never know. The fact of the matter is the Bills' run-stop defense has been putrid as of late because of the injuries they have sustained, allowing over 100 rushing yards and a touchdown to the New Orleans Saints and Miami Dolphins. They are playing down to teams, and if Rhamondre Stevenson has an opportunity and a say in this, he could end up being fantasy relevant. The next two running backs I wanted to mention are both of the Kansas City Chiefs running backs. This is what happens when we're on a bye week. We even consider Pacheco or Kareem Hunt. The Jaguars are the toughest matchup at the position. They have an opportunity of taking them on this week, and whoever scores a touchdown between these two, if either of them even are lucky enough to score a touchdown, whoever scores a touchdown will be relevant. The other one will be relegated to being an underwhelming performer once again. The final player I wanted to mention is Rachaad White. Like I mentioned earlier, Bucky Irving did have himself an MRI on Monday for an undisclosed injury, whether that's a hamstring, a calf, a knee issue, to be determined. But please go and do yourself a favor tonight. Pick him up off the waivers. When we're talking about guys like Woody Marks, of course, he is the clear potential, kind of RB1 of this backfield going forward. But in the event in which we may see Bucky Irving miss time, Rachaad White certainly has proven in the past, 2023 being an RB1 last season, throughout weeks 6 through, I think it was 13, had scored 8 touchdowns in 9 games. There's a lot of upside for a player like this, considering the offense he's attached to, and of course, the health of that offensive line trending in the right direction. All right, that's going to cover for me today. The final thing I wanted to mention before I close out today's video, I'll be live streaming later tonight, so swing on by if you have any questions regarding waiver wire trades, etc. And of course, if you guys want to go ahead and potentially send me individual messages because you can't make these said live streams, and you want to, of course, get all of your fantasy football questions answered, be sure to check out Patreon. Not only will you be able to ask questions and I'll answer them on a weekly basis, but additionally, of course, you'll be able to get my rankings every Thursday and Sunday, and you'll get the exclusive access to the Patreon-only Discord server. This all available. That's down in the description for those of you interested. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.